When I was a kid, I was absolutely terrified of dogs. They just looked so monstrous, and I was very, very small. I figured the fear came because we didn't have a dog. I think I was about 10 years old, and we had finally gotten one. This dog was born in a bar room, had one eye. So my parents weren't too sure if we were going to keep it or not, but we insisted we wanted to keep the dog. We had this dog for about 14 years, and the dog became part of the family. And when you're a little kid, you just automatically assume the dog's going to be around forever. As the dog got older, arthritis started setting in, dog's health started failing, dog could barely walk. Now we were much older and we knew what the inevitable was. My father was telling me he think it was time to put the dog down. We all agreed. The dog was suffering. We were all fine with it until that very morning. Well, the morning we were going to have the dog put to sleep, the dog walked up to me with her tail wagging, and I couldn't even look at the dog. Everybody in the family went to their corner of the house. We were all upset, including my father. He was brought to tears too. Well, we did have the dog put away. We all adjusted. We all knew it had to be done. But after that point, I swore I was never going to get a pet again because it just devastated me. I had acquired a dog years later. Actually, it was abandoned. I was much, much, much older. And this dog was a holy terror. Whoever had the dog before me just didn't know how to keep a dog. Didn't know how to train it, didn't know how to do anything. The dog was just so out of control. The dog turned out to be one of the best pets I ever had. She was always rambunctious, very playful, but that was fine. And I spoiled her rotten, which, what the hell? Pets are never around for that long, so why not spoil them? Actually, I had her while I was a JW as well, and that was one thing the witnesses, apparently, most of them didn't have pets. They didn't like dogs. And for ages, they said, you got to get rid of that dog. And I'm like, why? Well, she might bite somebody. Well, yeah, if somebody's breaking into the house, probably. And they're like, and you'll be accountable. I says, no, I'm not getting rid of the dog. But they were emphatic that I get rid of this dog. Well, some years had gone by. I was still a JW, and the dog wasn't feeling too well. And I noticed something was wrong. Where she was usually very active, she started slowing down. She would be drinking bowl after bowl of water. I said, something's wrong with this dog. So I went to the vet, and the vet had told me that, told me what the dog had had. And the dog was loaded with cancer. And I says, how bad? Well, after what he told me, the dog was just from head to toe, was just loaded with cancer. Now, I already knew what I had to do. The vet wouldn't even touch on that. He's talking about surgery. So I asked him, what would this entail? And he told me, and I'm like, the dog would spend her life in misery. So I made the decision, signed the paper, to have her put to sleep at that moment. I didn't even think about it. And he's like, well, if you want to do it that way. And I'm like, that's the only way to go right now. I'm not going to have the dog suffering. And then to go through all this surgery just to have to put to sleep anyways. So I was upset, but I wasn't going to let the dog suffer any longer. So I stayed with her while he euthanized her. On the way home, I was really upset. And it took me a while before I could bury her. After that, I swore never going to get a pet again. Thing was, I was at the Kingdom Hall, and amazing, the stupid things JWs say. One of the elders, actually two of them, pretty much said the same thing. Says, well, this is a good thing. And I'm like, how is this a good thing? Well, you won't be tied down now. You can go out and service more. I didn't like that response. I was, sometimes it might be best just to keep your mouth shut. But most people who feel that way about pets have never had pets, nor should they have pets. This is kind of what I want to go into, guys. So let's get to it. How you doing, guys? I am getting so much news about my old neighborhood. So many people are passing away this past few months. And I'm like, yeah, we're all getting up there. About 2 months ago, I think it was, a very good friend of mine had passed away. And when I got the news, I was kind of devastated. By the time I got the news, the funeral had come and gone, unfortunately. And the family, I guess, was handling it well. So the person who told me about it, I asked, well, how are the kids handling it? And he said, the kids are handling it pretty rough, which I could understand. The younger girl in the family, she basically grew up with a grandmother. So from the time she was an infant to adulthood, I'm assuming she's about 20 now. So I guess she was very upset. So she drove by me a couple of days after that, and just the sad look in her eyes kind of got to me. This is why I have a difficult time at funerals. It's not so much the person that passed away, it's the reaction from certain relatives around them or friends around them. That's what usually gets to me. Some years back, a co-worker of my ex-wife had passed away. And my wife asked me to go to the funeral with her, and I said, sure, I'll go with you. I didn't know the woman. I figured, I'll just accompany her there and stuff. I was fine walking in. I was fine. Talked to a few people there. Apparently, this woman's granddaughter was there. She was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Her mother's holding her. And she looked at me, tears streaming, and told me that her grandmother was dead. She told me the way little kids would say it, and that got to me. I said to my wife, I said, I'll be back in a few minutes. I got to step outside. And she says, well, we're going in. I said, I will be back in a few minutes. Just looking at the reaction of that little girl crying because her grandmother was dead kind of got to me. I was very close to my grandparents, so I kind of understood the feeling. And I've had this reaction at pretty much every funeral I've been to. And it was never because of the person that passed away. It was basically because of the reaction of friends or relatives that got to me. And this is every funeral. Until I was at the Kingdom Hall. Now, I think we've all been to memorials at the Kingdom Hall when somebody passed on in the congregation. And they were the coldest events I have ever seen. Because you still got JWs with this paste smiles on their face. I don't know if they're putting on a show, but the first one I went to, I was just, this is unreal. And you listen to the talks, they actually say very little about the person that passed away. It's more like plugging the organization. I went to several pretty much right from the get-go. As soon as I started studying, a few people had passed away. My congregation was loaded with older people, so it was quite common. We had 2 deaths almost back to back. One was a very well-known elder in the congregation, and I guess he'd been in the circuit for quite a while. When his memorial came about, there was standing room only. We had people from multiple congregations all file in. I had never seen that many people in the congregation before. Well, several weeks later, another woman that was actually in my service group had passed away. I went to her memorial. Very few people showed up. I mean, what are memorials? 45 minutes? And I was kind of angry that so few people had showed up. And the funny thing was, nobody had even mentioned it. I was kind of perturbed. The talk was actually pretty good. But after that, I kind of got turned off of the memorials when somebody had passed on. I was sitting in the back one time, one memorial. One elder came to me and says, "Put a smile on your face." They had family that aren't JWs. And I'm like, so I need to put a smile on my face. Yes, they're not JWs. So now we got to put on a show for people that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, I know the whole deal with that. They have to show outsiders, people from the outside. We're Jehovah's Witnesses. We're happy when people die because we believe in the resurrection. Which personally I thought was bullshit, because most people have some form of religious belief, life after death. And yet, for the most part, at the funerals, they're crying. They're upset. They're sad. They're not smiling. But Jehovah's Witnesses have to put that pasted smile. You can't tell me that deep down inside they're not hurting when a relative dies, but they're pressured to keep that pasted smile on their face and repress their pain. And the whole life of Jehovah's Witness is that: suppress your pain. The thing is, if you spend your whole life repressing your emotions like that, eventually what's going to happen? It's going to be like a tire. Fill it with air, fill it with air, fill it with air, and eventually it pops. But for some reason, Jehovah's Witnesses are not allowed to display emotion. Or not too greatly. That is, they can't overly laugh. They can't overly cry, because they have to show the outside world that we believe in the resurrection. So we don't have to be sad, because we know we're going to see them again. But for Christ's sakes, they still passed away. You're allowed to cry. And I guarantee quite a few of them do when they go home. I could never live like that. And this kind of kept conversation at the Kingdom Hall minimal, because you don't want to say too much, especially if you're upset about something, because the conversation would always come back to the Kingdom Hall. It would always come back to Jehovah. Yeah, they passed away. Do you mind if I grieve? But immediately they got to go into the resurrection. I had posted a video several months ago of a woman going to a cot. She was very upset because her husband had just passed away, and immediately JWs were at her door talking about the condition of the dead and about the resurrection. Okay, without giving this woman time to grieve, they're shoving their beliefs at her. Now, a lot of people in the comments section were like, they're just trying to help. Sometimes the less said, the better. And their timing is off. The one thing people don't want to do is have some religious BS shoved in their face as just as somebody had passed away. Maybe a month down the line. Maybe 2 months down the line. Some people maybe 6 months down the line. But let people grieve. People are very emotional. When they hurt, leave them be. But JWs are wound up so tight that they're not seeing this. They don't realize that people need a grieving process. You can't tell me that they don't either, but they're forced to put on this ridiculous show. This is just something I wanted to mention. This is something that always bothered me. Repressing emotion is not good. I don't care what religion you are. And it's kind of culty when you think about it. Anyways, guys, you all have a good day. I'll be talking to you soon.